Hey guys, it's Zach back with another review, this time of the Santali S1-O. It's a mouse release you may have missed about 7 months ago, but one I think is worth checking out. It positions itself in the market against both the GPX 2 and the Viper V3 Pro, but can it stand up to these stalwarts? Let's find out. So here we have it, the Santali S1-O. This is the Mirage edition. I've been wanting to try this mouse for a while, but it retails at $85, a price that I didn't want to pay. And I finally found a price on Mouse Market that I liked, so I picked it up. It's a larger ambi mouse, comes with 8K polling, with the same dongle you'd find on the Mad G and the Mad R. It also has a 3395 Nordic MCU and a 250 milliamp hour battery that has very good battery life in both mine and others' testing. Real quick on the company Santali, I had not heard of them before this mouse came out, and I was shocked at how good it was. They also have a glass pad they just announced the pre-orders for, but beside that, don't know much about the company. They do say they're based out of the US on Twitter, and the name strikes me as having potentially an Indian origin, but not entirely sure on that. So getting into the implementation of the mouse, this has the arm and opticals that we all know and love. They're very spammable and very tactile. They're medium light at the bottom of the mouse where I click. They're medium actuation in the middle, and they do get really heavy at the top if you click this high up for some reason, almost like that of the GPX 2 in the first batch. There is some play side to side at the bottom, and also some play side to side if you move in the middle here, but there's not a lot to write home about in game. It didn't really affect me at all when I was playing. There is a tiny bit of pre-travel, tiny bit of post, but they're again very spammable, nice rebound, no real complaints there. Press the bottom, you can create grinding, but again, not sure why anybody would be doing such a thing. Scroll wheel wise, it's very notchy and defined steps, probably light to medium on the scroll, and the click here is medium but very spammable, so no complaints on the scroll wheel. Has a nice rubberized little grip there. Coming to the side buttons, they're probably about an 8 out of 10 on this mouse. They rebound very nicely and they're very spammable, both the front and the back. They can sink a little bit in the shell if you really apply pressure, but nothing like you would find on a lower end budget mouse. And if you see here, there's like a little tiny bit of play back and forth, but again, nothing crazy. Pull the side up here, they protrude nicely and they're easy to access. My only real complaint is you can get, as you can see here, some pre-travel on both of the buttons before you actuate them. So not entirely perfect on that implementation of the side buttons, but overall, pretty solid and very enjoyable to use in game. So coming to the bottom of the mouse here, you can see there are 2 split skates on the back. For some reason, there's dongle storage here, but there's no 1K dongle that comes with it. You saw this dongle over here earlier. I wish this was just one big pad. And then they do have the pad on the front. Again, the skates aren't great. They're kind of slow, not my favorite skate to use on a mouse. They're standard stock skates. I will be replacing them. Beside that, the sensor position, as you'll see on Eloshapes later, shout out to them for adding sensor position, is a little bit further back than you'd find on both the GPX 2 as well as the Viper V3 Pro, which is to my preference, but might not be to yours, as it does slightly change how your aim feels on a mouse, but beside that, nothing else to write home about on the bottom of the mouse. Getting into build integrity, there's an ever so slight bit amount of flex if you press here in the middle of the mouse. Nothing at all toward the front, which is an issue we've seen on some cheaper mice. And if you press on the top, nothing. You can get some play here on the bottom, which you can see the way I'm holding this. Not really an issue in game at all, but that is there, as this mouse is a little bit lighter for how large it is. But overall, the build integrity gets a strong pass from me. Coming to the coating of this mouse, I was actually very impressed with this. I've heard some people say there isn't much of a coating, but that's just not the case. It's not super rubberized, but it's also not super dry and chalky. It's like a perfect mix right in the middle, and my hand locks in even right now. I've talked about how I usually put grip tape here on the back, but I get a strong grip on this without my hand sliding off the back here like it usually would with this coating, which means in my estimation, this is a really good coating. Probably about a 9 out of 10. One of my favorite coatings that I've used recently, right up there with the Skyrox V6. Before I get into a quick Eloshapes comparison, shout out to this Walhaut pad here that I've been borrowing from a friend. It's a nice hybrid textured pad that I did not see coming as one I would enjoy, but man, is it fun to use. Get out of here, fuzz. And now, back to your regular scheduled programming. I've seen the S1-O compared to the Waizowl Cloud quite a bit, and it is a comparison worth making, although there are some key differences, as you can see here beside the 6 gram base weight difference. There's also 1mm more length on the Waizowl Cloud, which is not a big deal. But as you can see here, there's a lot more back hump presence on the Santali, and it's also 1mm taller on the hump here in the middle, which you can feel. Also, the Waizowl is just a much wider mouse in general. And not only that, but the S1-O also gets narrower and tapers a bit more at the narrowest part of the grip width here, as well as having a further back sensor position. So while it does elicit memories of the Cloud, there are definitely some key differences here. So getting to the first shape comparison that I teased, the GPX 2. Oh no, what's this? It's a Rogue XM2 from Endgame Gear with, is that insane side creaking if you put any amount of pressure on the White Frost version? What's going on here, Endgame Gear? Anywho, that bad boy out of there. Back to the shape comparison, the GPX 2, the one that had to be made. Not much to write home about from the front here. The main thing I want to point out is there's not really any comfort grooves at all on the GPX 2 that I really enjoy. You can see there's a little bit there, but not ones you really feel. These ones on the Santali are more prevalent, definitely more felt in hand, even though they're also not the craziest ones I've ever seen. I do enjoy them more. Getting to the side view of the mice here, they're the exact same length, but the Santali side buttons are a little bit more accessible and more enjoyable to use. However, if you like having your hand supported throughout the entire mouse, you can quickly see that the GPX is much taller throughout the mid to front part of the of the mouse, and about the same, it's ever so slightly bigger here in the back hump presence. And again, it'll just support your hand more entirely throughout the mid to the front of the mouse. But the real difference you're going to see is when we flip these mice to their bottom. Main differences that stick out here, obviously, sensor position on the Santali further back, more tapering as you get up here to the narrowest part of the waist on the Santali where it stays flatter on the GPX. And the biggest difference you can see here, more back flare on the rear of the mouse here on the Santali, whereas the GPX does have that, but it stays generally flatter and it's not quite as prevalent. If we flip these like this, it stands out even more, that difference in the back flare on the mouse, and that is the main difference you feel in hand. So what this results in, even though the S1-O does get narrower here at the front, the way I grip the mouse, the back, because of the flare, fills up my palm much more and locks me in a lot more than it does in the GPX, which does, in my opinion, limit a little bit of the micro adjustments, and then it does make the GPX feel like an overall narrower mouse, even though it is not as narrow on the sides here as the S1-O. So an interesting thing to note, and not what you might assume would be the case based on the shapes of these mice. So the other mouse, in my opinion, this is trying to compete against, is the Viper V3 Pro here. What the heck? Get out of here, XM2. Go away. Stop creaking. Anyway, yeah, the Viper V3 Pro. From the front here, you immediately notice that, forget what I said about the GPX2, the Viper V3 Pro's comfort grooves are amazing, and I love them. They're very, very well defined, and I enjoy them more than those on the Santali. If we come to the side here, you really get an idea of how far back and accessible the side buttons on the Viper V3 Pro are for any grip. Unless you're gripping super far forward here, they're actually very central onto the mouse compared to most mice, including the Santali, and I do like that, as well as how tall these buttons are. I do really enjoy Viper V3 Pro side buttons. The side profiles of these mice are, though, shockingly similar in the hump profile. There's a little bit more presence here in the mid to front on the Viper V3 Pro, but not as much as there is on the GPX2, and a little bit more here on the back, and it does taper off more quickly as opposed to a slightly more drawn out taper on the Santali. The Viper V3 Pro is also listed at 127 millimeters, but these in my hand feel functionally the same length, even though it's listed 2 millimeters longer than that of the Santali. We're going to use this angle because I liked it a lot on the GPX2 when I switched to it. You can see there is back flare here on the Viper V3 Pro like the Santali, but there's a little bit more again on the Santali. I believe it's 1 millimeter in actuality. The sensor's a little bit further back. The side tapering here on the Santali begins a little bit earlier and is a little bit more severe than that on the Viper V3 Pro, and you can feel that in hand depending on where you grip. And then the flare out on the front again is about the same when they come to a head here. There is clearly some side tapering here on the Viper V3 Pro as we rotate the mouse, as you can see specifically right here. I do like how that feels in hand, but if we take a look at the S1-O, it becomes apparent how it just tapers a little bit more strongly up here. So if you have a pinky finger or your thumb on the other side of the mouse, coming to this point, you will notice that skinnier waist on the Aagaz. The software is nothing to write home about. I believe it's very similar to what Lambda used to use before they went to a web driver, the variety that has peak performance and long distance mode. Beside that, though, there's nothing else you need to notice here. It's just standard DPI, pulling rate, ripple, angled motion, all the standard stuff you'd look for in a software. It works fine. As far as my overall impressions on this mouse, my time with it was very positive, and the two standout features were the super grippy, well-implemented coding and the on-run opticals, very light and very spammable. It was an implementation I found myself using even when not in game, just to feel how tactile and satisfying they were. Even the parts of the mouse that I didn't rave about, like the side buttons, the scroll wheel, and the build integrity, are well done for a company like Santali that kind of came out of nowhere. My only real complaint being the stock skates, and honestly that's a complaint for me on almost all mice, including the GPX2 and the Viper V3 Pro. The one point I did want to bring up is this does retail for $85. I believe it's $60 on Max Gaming, and I got this for $40 used. That is quite the steal. It doesn't position itself well against stuff like the Mad R or the Mad G. They come in at the $40 price range and are almost as impressive. Not quite at the level of this, but very, very good. It does position itself well against its main competitors, in my opinion, the Viper V3 Pro and the GPX2. They both come in at about double the price of the Santali. So honestly, that's a pretty good deal, $85. And my overall impressions of this mouse are just really, really good. I did start to mess around with the mouse tester software on the Santali S1-O, but this is my first time analyzing it, so do bear with me on this. This is looking at polling rates from 1 to 8K and the latency between each update. What this really taught me here is that even on 1K, there's a cluster of these updates at 2 milliseconds, but at its peak on 8K, a majority of your updates are happening between 0 to 1 millisecond. So you're gaining at most 1 to 1.5 milliseconds. And I don't know if you've ever done the human benchmark test, but my variance on that is anywhere from 160 to 190 milliseconds, depending on which click I have. So if you're losing 1 to 2 milliseconds at absolute most from 1K to 8K here, what are we really talking about? As far as the latency between updates, not a big deal, and that's why you can still perform really well on 1K. I'm not sure if this is consistent, but in my testing, the higher polling rate I got, the more chance I got for these little blips in latency to occur on my mouse, where it was more consistent overall. You see we peaked at just over 4 on 1K, and it got a little bit higher on 2, 4, and 8K. But you do see what these higher polling rates do. They make your latency between updates much, much lower. So in theory, your pointer is being tracked at a higher precision, although in reality, what effect is it really having on your game? Again, this is just me kind of spitballing what I know about polling rates and what I saw in my testing, so please do comment below as I try to improve this testing throughout my next videos. The S1-O is advertised at 49 grams, and weighing it here, we come in at 49.4 grams, entirely stock, very close to advertised. And if we pull out the dongle storage here on the bottom, should you want to shave some more grams off, it comes in at 49.0, exactly on the dot as advertised. Really appreciate those tight weight tolerances from Santali. Also going to grab some measurements for you here. I get the narrowest part of the waist here on the mouse coming in at 56.6 millimeters. And then there's the midpoint of the taper here where my thumb rests exactly, which is 62.6 millimeters. The widest part of the back player is 65 millimeters, which matches that as advertised on Eloshapes. And I have the hump height max coming in around 38.8 millimeters. So that about wraps up for my thoughts on the Santali S1-O, a mouse that I don't think enough people know about and that I don't think has gotten enough recognition for how well it's implemented. So I just wanted to help get it out there more. Coming from a company that was relatively unknown, this is a shockingly good mouse, especially for their first iteration. And while I won't be maining it going forward due to its large size limiting my micro adjustments, I can give it a strong recommendation to anybody with medium to large hands. If you can find one of these for a good price, definitely pick it up and give it a try. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Follow me on X at DasherZach, where I've been posting more and more about mice and just finished my first giveaway. Be sure to check out the DasherZach Discord server, which has more people every day talking about mice, mouse pads, gaming, and more. And with that, we'll see ya.